Look at this scene. Brandy is pregnant, happy, and Chili herself is right there beside her, happy for her sister. But there's a problem. Before the scene we see at the end of Season 3, Chili told Bluey that this was practically impossible. She said Brandy wanted something more than anything else in the world, and, according to Chili, it was something she couldn't have. Every adult understood what the show was saying. So when Brandy reappears pregnant in The Sign, the series does something even stranger. It explains absolutely nothing. But we're going to show you the theories behind this story.
You already know, right? Another Cinewave is starting!
The problem. To understand why her pregnancy surprised so many people, you have to go back to the episode Onesies. That's the episode where Brandy truly enters the story. She's Chili's older sister, and even though she's Bluey and Bingo's aunt, there was one strange detail. The two sisters hadn't seen each other in 4 years, which just happens to be Bingo's age. And as the episode goes on, it becomes clear that the sisters didn't grow apart for no reason. At one point, Chili explains to her daughter that Brandy wanted something more than anything else in the world, but she couldn't have it. The show never actually says that she can't have children, and it didn't even need to. Let's watch the scene. While Chili is explaining this, her sister looks at Bingo in a way that pretty much tells us everything. And Brandy herself admits that it was hard to come back and see Chili with her family. In other words, she wasn't staying away from her sister. Being around Bluey and Bingo reminded Brandy of the thing she wanted more than anything, and believed she could never have. That's what makes the episode Onesies so emotionally heavy. Bluey takes an incredibly painful situation and shows us its impact without ever needing to directly say what happened. But this is where the detail that changes everything comes in. Because sometime later, Chili's sister appears again, and this time, the thing that once seemed impossible is right there in front of us. The reveal. And it's in the premiere of the episode, The Sign, that the series completely changes Brandy's story. During Frisky's wedding, she appears again. But this time, all you have to do is look at the character's belly. She's pregnant. Chili definitely already knew about it. She puts her hand on her sister's belly, and the two of them share that moment as if we already knew everything that had happened. But we don't! There's no conversation explaining what changed. There's no episode showing Brandy trying again. There isn't even a single line telling us what happened afterward. The series simply takes a character who was introduced desperately wanting a child, but being unable to have one, and then, sometime later, shows us that she finally did. And then the episode just keeps going, completely focused on Frisky's wedding. What makes this scene even more interesting is exactly that. One of the biggest twists in Bluey's story happens without a single line of dialogue. And when you realize just how big the jump is between the two episodes where the character appears, one unavoidable question comes up. What happened in between? The mystery. The strange answer is, we don't know. Bluey never showed us the journey between those two versions of this character. The woman who struggled to have children and the future happy and proud mom. And that's exactly where the most interesting theory started. One of the most talked about possibilities is that Chili's sister sought some kind of fertility treatment at a specialized clinic or hospital. Would that make sense? Yes! But there's one problem. The show never told us anything like that. It's also possible that what we saw in Onesies wasn't meant to suggest something permanent, but instead that Bluey's aunt simply had difficulty getting pregnant. After all, infertility doesn't mean a pregnancy can never happen. But again, that's a possible explanation, not an answer actually given by the series. And maybe that's the most important detail in today's video. The show could have solved the mystery with a single sentence, but it didn't. Instead, it left a huge gap between the character who believed she would never be able to fulfill her dream and the Brandy who appears pregnant at the end of Season 3. And that's why the mystery continues. This silence leaves us with another even more obvious question. Because if Brandy is expecting a baby, then who is the father? Would you like to be part of the Healer family? Comment the hashtag Bluey so we can get to know you. The father. So far, no character has been introduced as her partner. Bluey and Bingo's other uncle. We don't know if Brandy has a boyfriend or a husband. The show never says who might be expecting this baby with her, or whether that character has already appeared in the story. Because the series never explained it, several fan theories started popping up, but there's an important difference here. None of them have been confirmed. There could simply be someone who has never appeared before, which is probably the most likely possibility, and he may be introduced in Season 4 as Bluey's new uncle. Another theory is that Brandy may have chosen a different path to make her dream of becoming a mother come true. In other words, she could be a single mom. That happens too. The series may be saving that part of her story for the future. Right now, any answer beyond that would just be a theory. That's why Chili's sister's mysterious pregnancy gets so much attention. Because the series didn't just hide how the character got pregnant, it also hid practically everything about her life. And the mysteries keep going. All of this raises an even more interesting question. What if the show never intended to explain any of it to us? The explanation. It's possible that the answer to this mystery is actually simpler than it seems. Brandy is emotionally important to the story, but even though she's Chili's sister, she has never been a central character in Bluey. In the same way that Stripe, despite being Bandit's brother, isn't one either. She doesn't appear very often, she doesn't follow the family through other episodes, and even her voice, performed by actress Rose Byrne, is only used as a special guest appearance. So maybe the series simply has no real interest in turning her pregnancy into a complete storyline. Maybe the whole point was just to show that her life changed for the better. But it's exactly that empty space that makes fans come up with theories, right? Some people believe Brandy went through some kind of medical treatment and managed to get pregnant. Others imagine that there's a partner the series simply never showed us, and in that case, she started a relationship and is now happily building a family. And there are even darker interpretations about everything that may have happened during the years she stayed away from Chili. It's a shame that none of those answers have been confirmed, and maybe they never will be. She simply returned in the episode The Sign as a pregnant character, but that's not the only thing that episode puts right in front of our faces. The theories. Brandy appeared alone, with no partner, and this is where her story gets much more interesting. Because if Bluey doesn't give us an answer, the fans started looking for one. One theory is that the problem was never that the character was permanently infertile. Brandy could have a health condition that made pregnancy more difficult, but not impossible. And that gets even more interesting when you remember that Chili also went through the loss of a pup. Let's think back to the episode The Show, where this is revealed in the scene with the balloon popping. Could there be some kind of difficulty involving pregnancy in the family? There's absolutely no confirmation of that, but it's possible. Another theory shifts the focus. What if the problem wasn't even Brandy? She could have had a partner who had trouble having children. It's not only the mother who can be infertile, and the theoretical end of that relationship could have changed Brandy's possibilities. That's another possibility too, right? Again, it's just a theory. The show never showed us this partner, but there's an even more emotional interpretation. The Cattle sisters, Brandy and Chili, lost their mother, and maybe Brandy's fear wasn't only about not being able to become a mother. Maybe part of her pain was connected to what it means to take on the role of a mother after losing your own mom. In that scenario, seeing Chili build a family and then finally reconnecting with her may have changed something inside Brandy. She may have found the courage to try again and finally succeeded. Or maybe none of these theories are right. Only Season 4 will reveal the truth. And that detail is what makes the show's silence so brilliant. Bluey left enough room for several different stories to fit inside the same belly, and that's something really special. But maybe the biggest change in Brandy's life didn't start when she got pregnant. Before we talk about that, you have a mission.
There's a new video here every day, so subscribe and hit the bell to stay up to date.
The return. Coming back. Maybe it started when she finally came back to her sister, because the episode Onesies is also a story about the Cattle sisters reconnecting. Bluey's own official material describes the episode as a story about the two sisters seeing each other again after growing apart. And that changes the way we look at Brandy quite a bit. She spent years avoiding Chili because being around that family was simply too painful. But when she comes back, she plays with her nieces. And for the first time in years, she stops running away from that part of her own life. So there's an interesting way to read this. What if that reunion was the true beginning of Brandy's new chapter in life? Not because Chili somehow fixed her problem, but because returning to her sister forced Brandy to face a life she had kept at a distance. And when we see her again at the end of the season, she's no longer looking at Chili's family and wishing for something she couldn't have. Now Chili is the one looking at her sister's belly and feeling happy. The two of them are going to be together again. And this interpretation becomes even more powerful when we remember one person who isn't there to see either of them living this moment: their mother, Mrs. Cattle. And there's one final layer to this story that makes everything even heavier. The Cattle sisters also grew up without their mother. So when we talk about motherhood in this family, it isn't only about Brandy's desire to have a child. There's also an absence, like we saw in the episode Dragon. And that opens up another possibility. Maybe part of Brandy's fear, pain, or even her distance had something to do with what becoming a mother represented to her. That's only our interpretation, of course, but it makes sense because seeing her sister become the mother of two girls could make Brandy think about the mother she lost. But there's one image that says a lot without explaining anything. Brandy is finally going to become a mother, and her own mother isn't there to see it, but Chili is, and that's enough. The answer. And in the end, maybe that's the most curious detail about this character's story. Bluey showed us where her pain began. It showed the sisters growing apart. It showed us the thing she wanted more than anything and couldn't have. And then it showed us the result. She fulfilled her dream and she's pregnant. But the entire journey between one thing and the other simply disappeared. We don't know how it happened, but we might find out in the future. We don't know who it happened with, but that could become a storyline in future episodes. We don't know what changed beyond the fact that she's pregnant. The series answered the simplest question. Yes, Brandy managed to become a mother, but it left the most important question unanswered. What happened to her along the way to get here? And it's exactly that silence that keeps this character's story alive even after the episode ends. That's why we're so excited for Season 4, but until then,
We've left 2 videos on your screen so you can choose and keep having fun with us. See you in the next video.